one of the things that we talk about, and I think is very interesting, is how we are so easy to laud and applaud and embrace the Arab Spring, but the American Spring, we're trying to put a cap on it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's realistic, because people don't want to change. It's easier to shed tears than to change. Okay, that's a Baldwin comment he made, and so I want to kind of talk about something that's happened, and I think that people don't realize that it damages our democracy when there is suppression of the press. I mean, that was one of the biggest cases that we all studied with the whole printing press issue back when America first started in Philadelphia and stuff, and how they tried to confiscate the printing press to keep them from criticizing the government. Where here we had a situation where the police went into Zuccotti Park and decided to remove these individuals at 1 something in the morning, and something happened that should have never happened in the place we call America.
Yeah, well, they portrayed it as, you know, they needed to do this because the people in the community were complaining and things of that nature. And we've heard things all throughout about, you know, they don't like the drumming or the music or, you know, all these other things, trying to portray it as the community being extremely disgruntled. And I'm not sure what the truth of the matter is, but the issue is that these individuals are doing what it appears they have to do. And I understand how, you know, it might be an inconvenience if someone's trying to get across into their office and they're going to be late because they can't get through the crowd. But as you mentioned, we embrace the Arab Spring, and you know, you have to understand that when people become desperate, they do desperate things.
Right.
The issue we have now that I believe you're referring to is the way the police are treating the press. Because the press have recently complained, you know, and they've gathered, so it's not just one group, it's several groups, have complained that the police have not only, you know, roughed them up, you know, but they've also taken them and pushed them away from what's going on to prevent them from being able to properly report on the stories connected to Occupy Wall Street. And the issue is that I believe it was under Commissioner Safer that they already had rules in place that this was not supposed to happen. You know, if they're in a public place, they're supposed to be able to stand and observe and report. They're not supposed to be pushed back several blocks so that they can't properly report. Or there's been reports that if somebody takes out a camera and, you know, tries to take a picture of something that's going on. I think there's a specific incident where the police were carrying somebody who was bloodied, you know, and they tried to take a picture and then they're being roughed up. And it's basically violating the rights of individuals, not just because of the existing laws, but because of just, you know, general laws of what's supposed to happen when you're in a public environment.
You know, the thing is, most people don't understand, when you get your press pass, which you have to go to the police department to get, I think that's very interesting. You got to go to the police to get your press pass. It gives you the ability to cross fire and police lines so that you can report. So the whole thing that they got printed up on this press pass, that you have to sign all these documents and get all of this stuff and vouch for yourself and all this good stuff, they are suppressing the press. People were surprised. They asked me how come I wasn't down there more. I told them, I said, I knew this was going to degenerate into this type of situation. I knew it. And I knew that when the police started beating people, I wouldn't want to be there, because I know myself, and I know if somebody's going to hit me, I'm going to want to strike them back. And so I knew this was going to happen because, again, when we talk about the press, there are two different presses we're talking about. There's corporations that own the press that are putting the stories and information out there, and then there's the regular press or the free press.
Yeah, and what they're contending is that with this particular incident, what the police did is they went around asking people if they had press passes, and then once they produced it, that's when they ushered them away. So they wanted to make sure they could identify these individuals and they could get them out of the area, which is, you know, I guess the opposite of the situation that happened with the councilman, you know, where they're allegedly just gathering people up and pushing them into the crowd to make it seem like you said one big disgruntled, you know, angry mob that needs to be controlled through, you know, riot procedures.
Well, I mean, again, and when you look at somebody like Mayor Bloomberg, you would think that, you know, somebody that came up in the city, that's, you know, born and bred here, would respect the individuals that are here in the city and respect the idea of freedom. I mean, you went to school for free at CUNY. You know, it's our taxpayer money to help you do that, and all of these people that are out there that are protesting, from the CUNY students to Occupy Wall Street, are asking for the same thing: the right to be able to better themselves and to better their lives.
Yeah, and the things they're protesting are very, very valid. It's not some small issue, you know, that can be glazed over. I mean, I'm sure the Republicans have their idea as to why they need to have their, you know, estate taxes remain the way they are, or not get certain capital gains taxes adjusted. I mean, but those things, if you think about it, there are people who could say, okay, now you're nitpicking. You have how many billions in the bank, and you're nitpicking about, you know, losing, you know, a couple 100,000 or whatever the case. But we're talking about people who are losing their homes, who've lost their jobs, who can't get a job. And now we're talking about, like you mentioned, the CUNY students who are looking at an increase from, what is it, 4,000 to 6,000? You know, who's going to come up with an extra? I mean, a lot of students go to city universities because they need to have that low amount to pay in order to get their education. But if you can now increase it by 50%, I think that's a valid reason for them to be protesting.
And then for those people outside of the city of New York, we're talking about the City University of New York system. Is that what we're talking about? And one of the representatives came on Good Day New York, which is Fox 5 in New York, which is much of a Republican station than anything else. But it was interesting that he pointed that he said that only 60% of the people that are in the CUNY system don't pay tuition. And I thought that was very interesting. We don't have any proof of that information, but that's a fact he put out there. So if that's a valid point, then what are people complaining about having their tuition raised if 60% of them are not paying tuition at all?
Well, I think they need to clarify that, because, I mean, if they're coming up with the reason that for those who are paying need to increase it by, you know, 50%, then somebody needs to explain why they've carried on that procedure where they haven't equitably, you know, carried through the financing.
And think about that for a second. Isn't that ironic? Because we are talking about the 99% paying all of these taxes and funding these bailouts for these corporations and all these places, and then now we ask them to pay a little bit more to help contribute, that they don't want to do that. But now when we're talking about someone, and we've pushed, and President Obama has talked about education and the value of it in this country, and how we have to have people in certain sectors to be educated to be able to compete in this world. We're making it tougher for students to go to school. Okay, we're raising tuition, we're doing all these different things, and people forget. And remember one thing we talked about on the show previously: student loan debt has surpassed credit card debt in this country. People are going into debt to be able to get educated, to be able to compete, and when they graduate, they can't even get a job.